In the summer of 2011, in a quiet subdivision outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, the Henderson family seemed like they had everything figured out. Jason Henderson, 42, was a successful commercial real estate developer. His wife, Meredith, 38, worked part-time as a speech therapist and spent her afternoons volunteering at their daughter's elementary school. Their home, a sprawling two-story colonial with white shutters and a manicured lawn, sat at the end of a cul-de-sac where children rode bikes until the streetlights came on. Neighbors waved. Block parties happened every 4th of July. It was the kind of place where people moved to feel safe. But safety, as Meredith Henderson would learn, is just an illusion we tell ourselves to sleep at night. On the evening of August 14, 2011, Meredith called 911 at exactly 8:47 p.m. Her voice was shaking, barely coherent. She told the dispatcher that someone had broken into her home, that her husband had been attacked, that there was blood everywhere. When officers arrived 4 minutes later, they found Jason Henderson lying face down in the kitchen, a pool of dark red spreading across the white tile floor. He had been stabbed 7 times, twice in the back, 3 times in the chest, and twice in the neck. The weapon, a 10-inch chef's knife from the couple's own knife block, was still embedded in his shoulder blade. Meredith was sitting on the front porch steps, her hands covered in blood, her eyes wide and unfocused. She was wearing yoga pants and a tank top, no shoes. Her 7-year-old daughter, Emma, was asleep upstairs, untouched by the violence that had unfolded just below her bedroom. When detectives asked Meredith what happened, she could barely speak. She said a man had broken in through the back door, that he wore a ski mask, that he attacked Jason without saying a word, that she tried to fight him off but he was too strong, that he ran when she screamed. It was a story that, on the surface, made sense. Home invasions happened, even in nice neighborhoods. The back door showed signs of forced entry, the lock splintered, the frame cracked. There were no fingerprints, no DNA, no witnesses except Meredith herself. Detectives canvassed the neighborhood, but no one had seen anything unusual. No strange cars, no unfamiliar faces. Just another quiet Sunday evening in suburban Charlotte. But as investigators dug deeper, the cracks in Meredith's story began to show. The first red flag came from the coroner's report. Jason Henderson's wounds were not consistent with a frenzied attack. They were deliberate, calculated, delivered with precision. The angle of the stab wounds suggested the attacker had been close, almost intimate. There were no defensive wounds on Jason's hands, no signs that he had fought back. It was as if he had been caught completely off guard by someone he trusted. The second red flag came from the evidence at the scene. The blood spatter patterns didn't match Meredith's version of events. If she had tried to fight off an intruder, there should have been signs of a struggle, overturned furniture, broken glass, something. But the kitchen was pristine except for the body and the blood. The knife block sat undisturbed on the counter, every slot filled except for the one where the murder weapon had been. It was almost too clean, too controlled. And then there was Meredith herself. In the days following Jason's death, her behavior raised questions. She was calm, almost detached. She didn't cry at the funeral. She didn't ask about the investigation. She moved through the motions of grief, like an actress reading lines she didn't believe. Friends and family noticed. Co-workers whispered. Even Emma, her daughter, seemed confused by her mother's coldness. When detectives interviewed Meredith again, she stuck to her story. But her details were too rehearsed, too perfect. She remembered everything in vivid detail, the color of the intruder's gloves, the sound of his footsteps, the way he smelled like cigarettes and sweat. But when pressed on inconsistencies, she faltered. She couldn't explain why the intruder hadn't taken anything, why he hadn't hurt Emma, why he had targeted Jason so specifically. If you're following this story and want to hear more real-life mysteries like this one, don't forget to subscribe. We uncover the truths that refuse to stay buried. As the investigation continued, detectives uncovered a motive that turned everything upside down. Jason and Meredith's marriage, it turned out, was not as perfect as it seemed. Friends revealed that the couple had been fighting for months, arguing about money, about Jason's long hours, about Meredith's growing resentment. Jason had recently taken out a $2 million life insurance policy, naming Meredith as the sole beneficiary. He had also been planning to file for divorce. His lawyer confirmed that Jason had scheduled a meeting for the following week to discuss custody arrangements and asset division. Meredith, it seemed, had known about the divorce. And she had known about the insurance policy, but the most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. 3 weeks after Jason's death, a woman named Rebecca Lawson came forward. Rebecca lived 2 streets over from the Hendersons, and she had been walking her dog the night of the murder. She told detectives that she had seen Meredith standing in her driveway around 8:30 p.m., 15 minutes before the 911 call. Meredith had been alone, calm, checking her phone. Rebecca hadn't thought much of it at the time, but after hearing about Jason's death, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. If Meredith had been outside at 8:30 and Jason had been attacked around the same time, how could she have witnessed the attack? How could she have fought off an intruder? Detectives re-examined the evidence with fresh eyes. They realized that the forced entry at the back door had been staged. The lock had been broken from the inside, not the outside. The blood on Meredith's hands was consistent with someone who had inflicted the wounds, not someone who had tried to stop them. And when they searched the Hendersons' computer, they found searches in Meredith's browser history. Searches for how to stage a break-in. Searches for do police test for gunpowder residue on knives. Searches for life insurance payout after murder. On October 3, 2011, less than 2 months after Jason Henderson's death, Meredith Henderson was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. She maintained her innocence, insisting that an intruder had killed her husband. But the evidence was overwhelming. Her trial began in the spring of 2012, and it captivated the Charlotte community. Prosecutors painted Meredith as a cold, calculating woman who had killed her husband for money and freedom. They presented the staged crime scene, the inconsistent timeline, the insurance policy, the browser history. They called Rebecca Lawson to the stand, who testified that Meredith had been outside, alone, just minutes before the attack. They called the coroner, who explained that Jason's wounds were not consistent with a stranger's attack, but with someone who knew exactly where to strike. The defense argued that Meredith was a victim herself, a traumatized woman who had witnessed her husband's murder and was now being blamed for it. They pointed to the lack of forensic evidence linking her directly to the crime. They argued that the browser searches were taken out of context, that Meredith had been researching home security after a string of break-ins in the neighborhood. They called character witnesses who testified that Meredith was a loving mother, a devoted wife, a woman incapable of violence. But the jury didn't buy it. After 3 days of deliberation, they returned a guilty verdict. Meredith Henderson was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, her face blank, her eyes empty. Emma, her daughter, was placed in the custody of Jason's parents. She would grow up without a father and without a mother. Before we continue, hit subscribe, because some truths are too dark to stay buried. We tell the stories that linger long after the verdict is read. In the years since her conviction, Meredith has maintained her innocence. She has filed multiple appeals, all of which have been denied. She has given interviews from prison, insisting that the real killer is still out there. But no new evidence has emerged. No intruder has been identified. The case, for all intents and purposes, is closed. Yet questions remain. Why did Meredith do it? Was it really just about the money, or was there something deeper, something darker, that drove her to take a knife from her own kitchen and plunge it into the man she had once vowed to love and honor? Friends say that Meredith had always been ambitious, always wanted more than what she had. Jason, they said, had been holding her back, tethering her to a life she no longer wanted. The insurance money would have given her freedom, a fresh start, a chance to reinvent herself. But at what cost? Psychologists who have studied the case suggest that Meredith may have suffered from a form of dissociative behavior, a mental state where she convinced herself that killing Jason was the only way out. She may have believed on some level that she was justified, that Jason deserved it, that she was doing what needed to be done. But whether that belief was born out of genuine delusion or cold-blooded calculation, no one can say for certain. What we do know is that on the night of August 14, 2011, Jason Henderson was killed by someone he trusted, someone who shared his bed, his home, his life. and that someone was the only witness to his final moments. The case of Meredith Henderson is a reminder that the most dangerous threats are often the ones we never see coming. They don't wear ski masks or break down doors. They sit across from us at the dinner table. They kiss us goodnight. They know our routines, our weaknesses, our fears. And when they strike, they do so with a precision that only intimacy can provide. Today, Emma Henderson is a teenager. She lives with her grandparents in a different part of North Carolina, far from the house where her father was killed. She doesn't speak to her mother. She doesn't visit her in prison. By all accounts, she is a bright, resilient young woman who has worked hard to rebuild her life in the shadow of tragedy. But those who know her say that she carries the weight of that night with her, a burden that no child should ever have to bear. As for Meredith, she remains behind bars, serving out a sentence that will likely last the rest of her life. She has become something of a pariah in the true crime community, a woman whose name is synonymous with betrayal and greed. Some believe she is exactly where she belongs. Others wonder if there is more to the story than what was presented in court. But the truth, as it often does, remains elusive. If you're new here, subscribe. We tell real stories that still echo through time, stories that force us to confront the uncomfortable realities of human nature. In the end, justice came for Meredith Henderson. A jury of her peers found her guilty. She was sentenced. She was imprisoned. But for Jason, there was no victory. For Emma, there was no closure. And for the community that once trusted the Hendersons, there was only the lingering unease that comes from knowing that evil can hide behind the most ordinary faces. The night Jason Henderson died, the only witness was the person who killed him. And she almost got away with it. But almost isn't enough. The truth, no matter how long it takes, always finds a way to surface. And when it does, it leaves behind a trail of broken lives, unanswered questions, and the haunting realization that the people we think we know best are sometimes the people we don't know at all. This is the story of Meredith Henderson, the woman who killed her husband and called it a home invasion. The woman who stood on her front porch with blood on her hands and lies on her lips. The woman who thought she could rewrite history, one stab wound at a time. She was wrong. Before we close, we want to hear from you. Comment below and let us know where you're watching from. Are you in the United States, the UK, or somewhere else in the world? We love knowing that our community spans across continents, united by a shared fascination with the stories that reveal the darkest corners of the human heart. Drop your location in the comments, and let's connect. In a small courtroom in Charlotte, North Carolina, justice was served. But peace, the kind that lets you sleep at night, the kind that lets you trust again, that never came. It lingers just out of reach, a ghost haunting the lives of everyone touched by this tragedy. Jason Henderson is gone. Emma Henderson is growing up without her parents, and Meredith Henderson is exactly where she belongs, behind bars, with nothing but time to reflect on the choices that led her there. Some crimes are solved quickly, the pieces falling into place with satisfying clarity. Others take years, decades even, before the truth finally reveals itself. But this case, the case of the only witness, was solved not by forensic wizardry or eyewitness testimony, but by the simplest of human failings: greed, arrogance, and the mistaken belief that murder could be disguised as misfortune. Meredith Henderson thought she was clever. She thought she could fool the police, the prosecutors, the jury. She thought she could walk away from her husband's death a grieving widow, pockets full of insurance money, future wide open. But she underestimated the power of scrutiny, the persistence of investigators who refuse to accept easy answers, and the weight of evidence that doesn't lie. In the end, the only witness became the only suspect, and the only suspect became the only guilty party. This is the legacy of Meredith Henderson. Not a cautionary tale about home invasions or random violence, but a stark reminder that the greatest danger often comes from within, from the person who knows us best, from the person we trust most, from the person who stands to gain the most from our absence. Jason Henderson never saw it coming. He was killed in his own kitchen by his own wife, with his own knife. And for a brief moment, it looked like she might actually get away with it. But justice, slow and methodical, caught up with her. And now the only witness to Jason Henderson's murder, methodical, caught up with her. and now the only witness to Jason Henderson's murder, spends every day behind bars, with nothing but her memories and her lies to keep her company. The case is closed. The verdict is final. But the questions linger. What drives a person to kill someone they once loved? Is it desperation, calculation, or something darker, something we can't fully comprehend? And when the mask finally slips, when the truth is revealed, what are we left with? Only the haunting realization that monsters don't always hide in the shadows. Sometimes they sleep beside us. This has been the story of Meredith Henderson, the only witness. Subscribe for more real crime stories that refuse to fade, stories that remind us that truth, no matter how deeply buried, always finds